If you're always following good, strong, accessible practices and developing your instructional materials, then you always have those as fully accessible instructional materials, and they'll work for a lot of diverse types of students. Don't look for what you don't have. Go with what you already have. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Hello and welcome to the Education Vanguard Show. I'm very happy today to be joined by Jeff Sisk. Jeff is the Senior Manager of Assistive Technology at Fairfax County Public Schools, Virginia, the 9th largest school district in the United States. He's been working in assistive technology for over 25 years and actively participates in the planning and implementation of district technology initiatives. And I'm very happy to say that Jeff will be joining us as a featured speaker at the Jakarta AIFE, AI and Future of Education Conference in November 2025. So I'd love to have Jeff introduce himself a little bit more, and maybe Jeff give us a little bit of context about your educational setting. A lot of the listeners of this podcast are in international schools, and so it might be helpful for them to better understand what your setting's like, what does it mean to be the 9th largest school district in the United States, for instance, and that sort of thing. So welcome, Jeff.
Sure, yeah. So to introduce myself a little bit, I am the manager, as you indicated, of the Assistive Technology and Accessibility Program at Fairfax County Public Schools. And in terms of the location of the school system, we're the district that sits below, really just directly south of Washington, D.C. So we have a large population. It's a suburban population and a very diverse population. So there's a lot of diverse types of students and a lot of diverse need. I can't remember the last language count. We're certainly a multilingual school district. I know that we have well over several dozen languages spoken in our district, and I'm probably understating that to some degree. So there's all different types of students from different cultural backgrounds with different instructional needs that we're regularly serving. In that metropolitan DC area, just if you're wanting to know the numbers, we have about 1.2 million people living in our county, and about 180 to 185,000 students currently enrolled and registered in Fairfax County Public Schools. So we're looking to maximize, of course, student success. That's really one of our big initiatives, and we're always looking for creative ways to use instructional technology and assistive technology tools to do so.
That's fascinating. So 185,000 students. So that's an incredible number. So in terms of your work setting, what does that actually mean? You're working in a district office and going between the different schools. Like what does that look like? I'm just curious.
Absolutely. So I spent some time first as a teacher, specifically as a special education teacher, and I'm going to age myself a little bit. This was really kind of the dawn of the internet, and I found myself working within the earth science curriculum, and it expanded to include more and more technology uses, not only with the internet, but also with probeware and a lot of the stuff that you commonly see in science nowadays. And I also happened to be teaching some algebra and some social studies classes too. And I really kind of quickly learned the impact of technology use for reading and writing, as well as the scientific data that we were collecting in our science classes. And I diversified the approach towards using technology tools. And that allowed me to pursue a career where I was not only then a classroom teacher in my classroom, but I had the opportunity to extend out to other schools as well. So there's over 200 schools in our school district. And I was one of the persons that is hired, we currently call assistive technology coaches, that work with all age levels and all classrooms to maximize whatever student needs are really kind of needed to be addressed in diverse instructional settings. And it's been a very rewarding and creative job. From that position as a coach, I had been involved with the program for over 20 years. I worked as a specialist, specifically a technical specialist in the program for a number of years before becoming the manager of the program. So we currently have 33 coaches that serve those 185,000 students traveling between 200 schools. And I work with them to really troubleshoot. And of course, we're always looking for new options. We're always looking for creative and new approaches towards using technology and new developments in technology. So it really keeps the job fresh, and I'm really appreciative of it.
It's great. And so you've been involved in this for, 20 some years. How have you seen the assistive technology as a category evolve in that 20 years? There's obviously been a lot of changes, but I'm curious what your perspective has been at the coalface, so to speak.
Great question. I feel like that assistive technology and what we also call inclusive technologies have become more commonplace and widespread and easier to access over time. I definitely was a part of the educational setting before there was really a lot of one-to-one student computer initiatives. And really the evolution of that really within the last 10 to 15 years has really made a significant impact on the amount of technology tools that are in students' hands. And examples of that, I know that one of the more successful types of assistive technologies that we have used in the past for students with dyslexia would be a speech to text tool, or the opposite, a text to speech tool. So this is helping students with writing and it's helping students with reading. And those tools we used to have to really work to customize and install on a given computer anywhere in a classroom. But anymore, those tools are becoming more and more built in and readily accessible in diverse types of educational tools that are out there. And that's where we use that term inclusive as opposed to assistive. And that's really been a great development over time. And fortunately, we're finding more and more of those in everyone's classroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting. I come at this from the perspective of a former technology director, as I was just saying before. And, it used to be with this sort of technology, it would, if it was voice to text, you'd have to buy a license for like Dragon Speaking or something similar to that. And you would only put it on certain computers because you certainly couldn't put it on all. And now that's just something that most people use on a day-to-day basis. So is that sort of behind the transition of the term from assistive to inclusive?
Absolutely.
Does the term have the same meaning anymore, really? Because what used to be something which was kind of really for maybe students with particular needs is now something that really everyone's using. So is there still a term that is for technology that is perhaps only used by some students, or is it really that we're all using this technology now?
That's a great question. And fortunately, I think that those lines becoming grayer are a better and better thing. And I can address that in a couple different ways. And one of the ways that I like to really kind of go back to and refer back to are how our big technology developers design their operating systems or technology tools. And there's a number of examples that are out there, but I really like Apple's example. I'm going to pick on Apple. And we're actually not an Apple district. We do use some Apple products, but we're not necessarily that. But of course, we like their design approaches. They design from the fringe, so to speak. So they're always looking to make their tools as accessible to as many different types of people that are out there. And in doing so, the technology items that really are kind of, we would consider more kind of fringe or more out there and not necessarily needed, ultimately become needed and used more widely. And if I go back again 15, 20 years, the best example of that is a touch screen. So the way we used to access and log in computers was more strictly based around a keyboard. And there are persons for physical disabilities or for other cognitive disabilities hadn't been able to access computers in the same way. And there was a lot of work to provide that touch access on different monitors and other tools that were out at the time. And Apple in its design, really just started looking at the best way to provide touch access into its devices and products. And ultimately now that is the way everyone is pretty much accessing the mobile devices that they have in their pockets, their tablet devices, and even their laptops. And it wasn't just because there was some, select groups of people that required accessing the device that way. It just became convenient for everyone to access their products that way. And in that way, I think that is the difference between inclusive and assistive technology. We're still identifying assistive technology tools for persons that require them. So either that could be for some type of cognitive deficit or a physical deficit. It's really up to those school teams, and in my world, for IEP teams, individualized education plan teams, to have those conversations centered around instruction and what's required for a student to access curriculum. And that's when that inclusive technology becomes assistive technology.
One big trend in schools, certainly in international schools, is conversations around UDL, Universal Design for Learning. So how do UDL and assistive or inclusive technology intersect?
They're married very well. And we are very appreciative of UDL initiatives when they happen within instruction. And we fortunately are in our district are really embracing that wholeheartedly over the past several years and are making plans to deliver UDL into classrooms as widely as possible. So we're really identifying those technology tools to provide custom learning experiences to students and make them more widely available, not only physically available on computers, but then also within training and professional development and instruction, not only with students, but then with teachers. So as we really want to diversify and have a rich technology landscape, and then in turn, have a good awareness of those technology tools. And that allows that tier one of UDL, that beginning UDL support of finding the appropriate technology tool in the simplest and easiest manner, more readily accessible to students.
Fantastic. And the other, big trend, I think, or term that we're seeing at the moment, obviously, is AI. And you're joining us for the AI conference in Jakarta. Where have you seen the impact on AI and assistive and inclusive technology so far? What are the things that are most exciting you?
Yeah, it is an exciting developing area. And I know that I feel like we're in its infancy and really kind of getting to its understanding and knowing its impact. We're definitely seeing more and more build in and buy in of, go back to UDL, and I mentioned those tier one supports. AI is being built into more and more products daily. And I think that inclusive piece is something that we're willing to see. But we certainly have great AI tools that are making leaps and bounds with how students are accessing and organizing their work, how they're approaching research, how they're providing supports for reading and writing. And the more inclusive they become in the technology tools and products that they use, the more widespread we're going to find those AI tools.
I wonder, like, I think one of the pushbacks against AI has been, that maybe is it doing too much of the cognitive offloading in terms of like organization. And I even find for myself, I use an AI tool that helps me draft emails, for instance, right? And I'm like, am I just now somebody that's going around clicking boxes on my computer? Am I actually doing the work anymore in terms of, are students missing out in some ways if AI is doing the work or assisting them in this way?
It's a great question. And I like your example of drafting. And I think that we are definitely finding, if assuming that AI is simply going to do everything for you, you're not going to get what you want from it. And that is, I think, a change in the approach in our instruction. So instead of really kind of knowing that the AI tool is going to draft or compose whatever you want to do in your writing, and then you can walk away from it, is a significant mistake. And ultimately, you're really now with the learner or with the instructor asking, is this saying what you want it to say? And that is a different level of cognition, and it's a different level of thinking skills, and requires analysis then too, right? So I think it's a change in that mindset. It's a change in our approach and how we're writing. And so it's taking away maybe more of the a tedious task. And I know some students certainly find drafting to be a tedious task. Takes that piece and changes it. I don't want to say that it even removes it. It just simply changes it. But I'm sure that, Justin, you use that example of an email. You're careful as what you're going to send out, especially to superiors and others of the public in an email. So you have to make sure that you want that to say, what it should be saying. And that is, again, like a different level of skills. And that's that different approach that we're finding in our classrooms.
Yeah, one of my colleagues said that my emails are now much more friendly and nice. So, they're still getting my meaning across. I've always found you were talking about Apple technology before. I've always been fond of the Steve Jobs. I don't even know if it's a real quote, but I've repeated it many times, that computers are like a cognitive bicycle, right? They don't take away work, but they allow you to go further and faster, right? With the same amount of effort. And I guess that's sort of maybe true. I don't know if you would agree with some of these AI tools as well. They don't necessarily replace cognitive work, but they allow us to sort of reach higher and do more than raise our baseline from what we otherwise would be able to do.
Absolutely. I think it's a great analogy. And it takes me back, again, being a little bit older, it takes me back to the emergence of the internet. And a lot of the same fears, you're bringing up the fears of AI, that I'm hearing around AI currently remind me of that time, that the internet was going to replace thinking. The internet was going to really kind of move away from anyone's ability to research or to know anything, because you could simply look it up, right? But we've certainly found that's not the case. It's just really changed our approach. And there are definitely, issues and concerns that are still alive today, from different types of technology uses and especially internet use. But with that being said, it's a part of our everyday being and culture, and so that has really just changed all the things that you're bringing up. It's changed UDL, it's changed assistive technology and inclusive technology, and I can certainly speak to a lot of experiences where it has made our lives better for students.
Yeah, I mean, and that sort of takes me into my next question, right? I mean, the inclusive, accessible technology has made so many people's lives better, being able to interface with, technology. Are there areas where, assistive technology is not doing enough? Are there areas where you wish, this for this kind of student, I wish there was this tool? I'm curious about that because it does seem like there's been such a rapid development in the last, 20 years. So where are the next steps? Where are the boundaries that need to be broken around technology and assistive technology?
A lot of emerging technology surrounding communication and access, which is going to be beneficial towards a lot of folks. I really see a lot in terms of, I mentioned touch access before, and how that was designed for, sets of people originally with physical disabilities or even cognitive disabilities, but then it serves the masses ultimately for the best. And I see that really happening now with eye gaze technology. So that eye tracking that a computer camera can do to provide additional access and communication with the technology interface. And again, like I can think of persons with special needs that require that type of tool, but ultimately that's going to be beneficial more widely also. The same with communication and specifically nonverbal communication. There's better development with technology tools being able to speak for persons that don't have the ability to speak. And then probably in your world too, Justin, and I don't really deal with this as much in the States, but to some degree, because I said we are a multilingual group, that's language and translation too, right? So I think that we're speaking to a lot of experiences and development there that I'm really excited about for the very near future, not necessarily the far future, but the near future.
Oh, I mean, certainly in international schools, oftentimes it's not the students so much that schools are communicating with in different languages, but the parent groups. And I know a lot of these AI tools are being really transformative in terms of the translation piece, communicating with parents, where before, you might have to have somebody on site doing translation, putting, you think about the volume of materials that school puts out, right? That now you can do that in a much more sophisticated and clear way than you could before. So I think, yeah, for sure, that's making a big difference already. I wonder, could you identify for the audience some low-hanging fruit that any teacher might be thinking about implementing in their classroom? What's something that a teacher that wants to provide accessibility for all students but may not be up on this, what's something that they could be made aware of that could be beneficial to students in their classroom?
Mhm. Glad you asked that question. And I know that we're going to talk about sessions here in a little bit, and my participation in the AIFE conference. So this is a bit of a lead in this answer towards that. But in terms of, first of all, there's really kind of two areas that we've discussed, and that's assistive technology and accessibility. And while they're very closely related, we often say that they're two sides of the same coin. And so that low hanging fruit for teachers is to first ensure their instructional materials, especially their digital instructional materials, are accessible, meaning that any technology tool, such as a text to speech reader, is going to have an easier time navigating that text and reading that text to a student that requires that type of tool or that type of support. And there's just really some quick and easy tricks to kind of change your practices towards composing a document that will make that widely accessible to many diverse types of students. And so, with that said, like the opposite side of the accessibility then is the assistive technology or the inclusive technology, which are technology tools in that example that would be reading that document. And as we mentioned before, a lot of those tools are built into the technologies that many people have either at their fingertips or in their pockets. So those devices can read for them, they can listen to them and type for them. It's just a matter of knowing that they're there and where to find them. And I think in terms of the evolution, you spoke with that a little bit earlier of assistive technology in my career and occupation, I feel like I'm doing more and more of just simply pointing that out. and not necessarily delivering those tools to people. And that's a really nice feeling. So once you know that those tools are there and you see their impact for different types of kids, you're always going to go back to them. And if you're always following good, strong, accessible practices and developing your instructional materials, then you always have those as fully accessible instructional materials, and they'll work for a lot of diverse types of students. Don't look for what you don't have. Go with what you already have. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Oh, that's great. And I wonder, like you're in a school district of 185,000. I think you said there's 3 or so, people like yourselves going around assisting teachers and schools. I mean, a lot of the international schools that we're dealing with, even relatively big ones, wouldn't have an assistive technology coach. So what advice would you give schools or districts in implementing assistive technology? Who can take the lead on that? How can that play itself in a kind of smaller environment where there isn't necessarily the scale to have, full-time assistive technology coaches? And I think probably part of your answer just there is part of the answer to that, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But in terms of resources that are out there and ways to explore and find other types of professional development, categories of tools that are out there, you can do just general searches for assistive technology or inclusive technology. One organization that I refer back to, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education, is CAST, C-A-S-T. Used to stand for the Center for Applied Special Technology. I really think they've kind of gotten away from that specific verbiage, and they just kept the acronym of CAST, and it's cast.org. But they really provide a lot of great resource material that I regularly reference and keep up with in terms of UDL, inclusive technology, and assistive technology, and best practices and easy tools that you can reference and find. We always try to participate in that community as well as our own social media community. So I know that Fairfax County Public Schools might be a long way from Jakarta, but then I would still love to build the community within Jakarta and speak to them as much as possible within our social media environments. So any common social media tools, we're communicating there and are part of that professional community to always build ideas and talk to new developments in assistive and inclusive technology and hopefully build more awareness.
Yeah, fantastic. And at AIFE, you're running 3 sessions. So I was hoping you could give a bit of a quick overview, give the listeners a little bit of a preview about what to expect from each of those sessions.
So the 3 sessions, and I can't wait. I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to talk to your community and to other communities about these topics. It's been a lifelong passion of mine. So it's really not what I consider like difficult work. Very fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. It's enjoyable work. That's how I describe it. So I really am looking forward to this experience. So I'll start by saying that. For the first session, though, I mentioned kind of like a little bit, beforehand, the difference between accessibility and technology integration. And that's the first session, Choose Accessible Learning Materials. And there's the acronym CALM. That's what Choose Accessible Learning Materials are for your classroom. So when you're developing your instructional materials, these are practices and approaches that make them as easily accessible for diverse groups of students as possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be for students with disabilities. That could also be English language learners as well, as we mentioned. So these are just quick, convenient ways that hopefully you grab onto and will always remember. And once you develop your habits of developing your materials, your electronic materials in this way, your students will be much happier for it. And I will bring video of case examples of our students speaking to that so that you can hear their side of the story of what they could do prior to having accessible learning experiences, prior to having accessible learning materials, and then after having accessible learning materials. So like that's that first session. The second session, inclusive technology strategies that support reading and writing, are then looking at the technology tools that support literacy. So if students are struggling with either of those tasks, it's that low-hanging fruit that we spoke to earlier. The technology tools that will be speaking to will be widely found no matter what type of technology device that you have or what type of operating system that you're using. So there's those tools, and there's also just simple strategies to change how you're approaching your instruction so that students that might be struggling with specific instructional tasks around literacy would have an easier time functioning in your classroom. And then that final piece is really the same approach, but really as it applies to executive functioning. So that's inclusive technology strategies that support executive functioning. So that is the management and organization of a student's day-to-day function within their school setting. So I go back, and I'm really going to date myself. My favorite example is the backpack, what we call the backpack burst, where there is the student that's coming in and there's the wads of paper everywhere, and they're having trouble tracking assignments. They're having trouble following up and knowing when assignment due dates are. These are just quick and easy tools that pretty much is existent in every technology, operating system, and platform that someone can access to make those organizational tasks function a little bit better. And I feel like it's a lot to talk about actually in a short amount of time. And I'm sure that there's other approaches out there that I will be listening to as well as bringing. So I think that we'll have like a good discussion around those topics.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Jeff. And we're very much looking forward to having you join our community face-to-face and share your decades of experience around assistive technologies and their intersection with AI and all of the other topics that will be at the conference. So we'll see you in November, and looking forward to it.
Absolutely, Justin. I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.